The Charleston Christmas that changed everything. I still feel the bite of that night every time Christmas comes around. It was supposed to be a new beginning for me. My first holiday back in Charleston after the divorce, eager for a clean slate and maybe a sliver of peace. The city was aglow, Spanish moss glimmering with string lights, air sweet with wood smoke, and the tang of cold salt from the harbor. My parents' colonial house, white columns wrapped in garlands, looked straight out of a movie. Everyone was there. Old relatives from Savannah, neighbors I hadn't seen since high school, the whole Turner family. Laughter and music filtered through rooms, heavy with the scent of cinnamon and pine. On the surface, it looked perfect. But there was a nervous energy pulsing beneath every smile, and I felt my nerves prickling. I'd rehearsed for this. Forced warmth, careful answers for the usual questions. Still working in data analysis, huh? Met anyone new yet? How are you holding up after everything? I'd worked so hard to come back stronger, to prove to myself I wasn't a cautionary tale. But in my mother's immaculate dining room, seated at the glossy mahogany table, with a glass of something sweet in hand, I felt every eye tracing my movements, rooting for cracks to appear. For the first hour, I managed, not quite at ease, but holding my own. My brother Ethan carried most of the conversation, animatedly talking about his job in Atlanta. My dad, James, was already deep into his second round, regaling anyone who'd listen with some story about his career in banking. And my sister Lindsay drifted from group to group, her arms full of gifts, her voice carrying. My mom, Linda, popped out of the kitchen every few minutes with something fresh from the oven and a frosty smile reserved for the guests. I played my part, smiling, pitching in, nodding at jokes, carefully dodging jabs disguised as banter. I caught the first real sting as we gathered for dinner. My dad lifted his glass, joking about new beginnings and bum luck, his words skating just close enough to my divorce to make the table tense. I tried to fix my focus on the roast and the buttery mashed potatoes, not on my clenched jaw or the way my aunts set their cutlery down, uncomfortable. Lindsay stepped in with a sweetly barbed comment about some people just being better at starting over, and laughter broke out. It wasn't new. I'd spent years growing calluses against exactly this, feeling the need for air and maybe a moment of privacy. I slipped into the hallway with the pretense of answering a work email. The house was quieter here, far from the chorus of forced good cheer. Ethan was sprawled on the couch, phone in hand. "You want it?" he asked. I nodded, thanking him, and took his phone, intending to check my inbox and dive back in before anyone missed me. But something flashed on the screen, a social media notification. My father's profile, always his pride and joy, a collection of family photos and self-congratulatory posts, had a new update that everyone seemed to be seeing. That's when the world stopped. Right there, sandwiched between pictures of eggnog and the family dog, was his latest entry. If you could erase one person from the Turner family, should it be Brittany? She's failed her career and marriage. Maybe we'd be better off without her. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted. Every ounce of strength I'd pulled together since coming back to Charleston unraveled as I read that sentence over and over, not trusting my eyes or my disbelief. Worse still, the comments started piling up beneath the post. My mother, Linda, sweet, soft-spoken, always polite Linda, wrote, "She's always been stubborn." Lindsay quipped, "We all have to carry her weight sometimes." Family friends, who'd hugged me hello just an hour earlier, joined in. "She's a sweet soul, but maybe just unlucky." might be a blessing if she found her own way somewhere else. Even Ethan's name showed up, liking the post without a single word typed. At that moment, my entire world shrank to the blue glow of that feed. I stood frozen, alone in the half-lit hall, Christmas lights flickering through the transom, voices happy and oblivious in the other room. I felt gutted and exposed. My greatest fears broadcast to the very community I'd so desperately tried to impress and redeem myself before. Co-workers, neighbors, old high school friends, even distant cousins could see my family voting me out in real time. It was a wound deeper than anything my ex-husband had ever managed to inflict. But the humiliation didn't end there. As I clutched the phone, numb, Ethan poked his head around the corner, eyes widening as he registered my expression. Britt, But I couldn't answer. I couldn't be there another second. With my hand shaking, I returned his phone and stepped onto the porch, icy night air slapping me awake. I stared into the darkness, hearing only the echo of my name in that post, evidence that even my own family thought I was disposable. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was angry, burning, volcanic, electric anger, bubbling beneath the grief and embarrassment. That Christmas in Charleston was supposed to be a do-over, a promise that it gets better. Instead, it became the dividing line between the old me, who tried to earn their validation, and the new me, who, at that instant, swore never to let them dictate my worth again. That was the night I began fighting back, not just for my reputation, but for my right to own my story at last, on the edge of success in the shadow of comparison. After my messy divorce left me reeling, I did what I do best, poured myself so completely into work that the edges of my own life blurred. I signed up for every freelance project I could find, crunching numbers late into the night for clients in and around Charleston, convincing myself that each new contract was a step back into the sunlight. The first big win, a $15,000 project with a growing tech startup, should have felt like a badge of honor. Instead, it was met with barely an acknowledgement at home. My father, James Turner, had spent decades as a high-profile banker, sharp-dressed, eloquent, revered at every local Rotary event. He was a man who savored accomplishment, but only when it fit his own narrative. And in the Turner narrative, my sister Lindsay was the lead. At 35, Lindsay was a star journalist, her byline appearing regularly in Charleston's trendiest publications. Stories about her awards, her speaking gigs, her ever-expanding social circle flowed as effortlessly as champagne at Sunday brunch. Even my mother, Linda, once a public school teacher, now devoted full-time to fawning over Lindsay's news, shared every professional milestone with religious zeal on Facebook. At the dinner table, comparison was a weekly ritual. "Why can't you be more like Lindsay?" my father would say, as if those words weren't a knife between my ribs. Lindsay, ever gracious in public, would offer patronizing encouragements. "You're working so hard, Brittany. I'm sure it will pay off eventually." I'd mastered the art of swallowing retorts, reminding myself that I had clients who trusted me, businesses who depended on my analysis, even if my own family couldn't see past the glow of Lindsay's spotlight. Ethan, my youngest sibling and the family's reluctant peacemaker, was the only one who seemed content to orbit quietly on the edge of the drama. He'd shrug off the tension, burying himself in coding projects and video games. His detachment stung in its own way. The calm in his voice when he told me, "That's just how Dad is. You can't take it so personally," was both a balm and a bitter pill. The worst part, I'd grown up believing I was celebrated for my brain, When I was a kid, Dad would beam with pride as I raced through math workbooks at the kitchen table. But the moment Lindsay's star rose, winning writing contests, dazzling at debate tournaments, my mathlete medals faded to background noise. Even after college, when I landed a competitive position in data analytics, Dad's eyes would glaze over by the time I finished explaining a project. Yet if Lindsay so much as tweeted a funny quote, the whole family would hear about it by dinner time. And that extended to social media, a careful log of Turner family triumphs, carefully curated by Dad. Lindsay's successes were celebrated. Mine, if mentioned at all, were footnoted with a "Nice try, Brittany.
Damn it.
Maybe next time." It was as if I was meant to play the supporting role in my own home, an extra cast member in the epic drama of Lindsay's life. Still, I kept striving, updating my certifications, taking late-night calls for West Coast clients, stacking up contracts that paid the rent, and then some. But in the echo chamber of my family, none of it measured up. Sitting across the table from Lindsay, the Turner family's North Star, my victories shrank, mere footnotes to her headline. The comparison wasn't just hurtful, it was suffocating. No business accolade, no freelance breakthrough was ever quite enough. And that perpetual measuring stick they wielded so expertly, it became both the fuel and the chain that kept me forever on the edge of their approval, but never truly at its center. The past, buried beneath hollow praise. It's almost paradoxical, looking back at my childhood and seeing how praise, supposed to be nourishment for a child's self-worth, became a slow-acting poison in my family. My earliest memories were bright with my dad's encouragement. He'd sit at the table, beaming at my math worksheets, calling me his little analyst, rubbing my head whenever I'd solve some brain teaser before breakfast. During those years, I really believed I was meant for something big. My parents even enrolled me in a summer science camp in Georgia, where I made models of the solar system and took home first prize in the end of camp contest. My mom hugged me so tightly, a proud smile that felt like sunshine. But the rules at the Turner household were always shifting. The summer Lindsay won her first citywide journalism award, it was as if a switch flipped. Suddenly, every conversation at home began and ended with her name. My trophies were dusted only in passing. "That was great, honey, but wait till you see what Lindsay did." By 7th grade, the house was a shrine to Lindsay's accomplishments. The mantel above the fireplace displayed her debate ribbons and clippings of her newspaper columns. When relatives visited, Dad made a show of pointing out the coverage Lindsay had gotten for her profile of the mayor, glossing over my science fair medals like they were polite afterthoughts. Mom picked up the habit, too. Facebook posts about our brilliant daughter Lindsay went viral among her friends. There was a subtle choreography to those years, a balancing act where I learned to shrink myself, to stay quiet so that Lindsay's spotlight never dimmed. I still remember a Thanksgiving when I handed Dad a printout of my first data visualization project, something that took weeks and impressed my professors. He showed it a brief, distracted smile before pivoting. "Guess what Lindsay's working on for her next article? The whole city will read it." The pattern cemented itself over the years. I went off to college on a partial scholarship in computer science. No easy feat for a girl from a state school in South Carolina. When the acceptance letter arrived, Dad nodded, watching the college football game. But when Lindsay got her journalism internship in New York, the entire family went to dinner, champagne corks flying. Even I couldn't help but laugh, sometimes, at the comic predictability of it all. As I got older, those moments of hollow praise stuck with me the most. At family gatherings, if I shared a career update, I've landed a new contract, just closed a $10,000 deal. It was met with benign neglect. Dad might pat my shoulder. Solid work, he'd say. But then add, maybe next time you'll get a big account, like Lindsay's work with the Tribune. If Mom so much as acknowledged my job, it was with that tepid blend of politeness and disappointment. We're glad you're working hard, honey. That's all. The effect wasn't immediate, but it was deep. I started doubting myself. A quiet, gnawing voice that wondered if I was ever going to be enough. Was my work just good for a girl? Was my salary nothing compared to Lindsay's accolades? I buried myself in continuing education, getting new software certifications, upgrading my resume every year. With every new skill, I hoped for a reaction, a spark of pride from the home team. It was always the same. Lukewarm recognition, followed by a hard pivot to Lindsay's next triumph. As social media became Dad's little kingdom, the wounds reopened online. He'd post about Lindsay interviewing a state senator, but ignore my project analyzing healthcare data for the city. Work that ended up in municipal reports. I left comments, sharing screenshots of my dashboards, and Dad would reply, "Great effort, Britt. Still chasing the big fish, huh?" Joking, but barbed. The message came through loud and clear. You're not the star here. And when my life fell apart, my marriage collapsing after 3 years of chronic absence and broken promises, those praises became outright indifference. Dad sent a curt text. You'll figure it out. Mom delivered a lecture about learning from mistakes. Lindsay weighed in with a 2-sentence email. Maybe it's time to focus on your career. That always worked for me. I told myself to take it on the chin. I spun it into motivation. Late nights poring over client data, charting my wins in spreadsheets that only I would ever see. Even after landing a rare 6-figure contract last year, the family only responded with a half-hearted, "Good for you, Britt." Meanwhile, Lindsay's byline at the regional magazine earned dinner, balloons, and 2 weeks of humble bragging on Instagram. Those years taught me a brutal lesson. Family praise means nothing if it's just a performance, a prop to keep the favorites shining. I've learned now that the real measure of my worth can't be found in their polite smiles or their empty posts. It's in the tangible fruits of my persistence, the clients who trust me, the friends who cheer, and the future I'm building on my terms, not theirs. The night everything broke. Betrayal in Charleston. The sky over Charleston was an inky black, the kind of humid December night where the air hangs heavy and every street lamp flickers through a veil of Spanish moss. That Christmas party was supposed to be my chance to finally show I'd moved on. A new chapter, a fresh start. But as I pulled up to my parents' sprawling colonial house on the edge of town, anxiety gnawed at me. Through the bay windows, I could see everyone bustling. Dad holding court by the fireplace. Lindsay, still soaking up compliments about her latest article. And Mom, bustling from room to room, that bright hostess smile fixed in place. The old house was lit up like something out of a movie. But beneath all the warmth, I felt a chill settling on my skin. I tried to look the part, dressed in a crisp navy dress, hair straightened just so. I packed a store-bought pie and a smile that never quite touched my eyes. The moment I walked in, I felt the atmosphere tighten. Dad gave me a hug that was more posture than affection, while Lindsay's greeting was a quick smirk and a cheek kiss. Mom's eyes darted to me and away, as if she was afraid even to acknowledge I was really there. Holiday chit-chat circled me like vultures. Cousins bragged about new jobs. Uncle Matt retold his favorite banker stories. People asked shallow questions about my work, never about how I was doing. Every compliment felt like a backhanded jab. Still doing your number crunching thing, huh, Britt? You're so disciplined. Maybe you'll get your big break soon. Someone laughed politely. I couldn't tell if it was at the joke or at me. I smiled, even as my jaw clenched. Dinner was meant to be the great equalizer, a chance for everyone to gather and celebrate. But for me, it was just another arena. Dad carved the ham with showman's flair, telling one too many stories about the good old days at his bank. Lindsay dominated the conversation, recounting a recent interview with a local politician, her voice carrying effortlessly above all others. Whenever someone brought up my freelance successes, Dad brushed it aside. Lindsay just published a city cover story this week. Now that's something. I tried to bring up a client win, mentioning how my latest contract with a Charleston tech startup had already turned their projections around. Nobody was listening. Lindsay swirled her wine, throwing in a pointed, "Brittany, maybe you'd get out of your rut if you networked more. I can connect you with someone in media if you're interested." Everyone chuckled, as if her suggestion carried the weight of concern, not condescension. My face burned, but I swallowed the humiliation for the sake of peace. The meal dragged on, stuffed with laughter that sounded too rehearsed, and stories meant to parade, never unite. Each toast felt like another roll call of accomplishments, none of them mine. When the pie I brought finally emerged, Mom set it down with an obligatory, "That's sweet, Brittany. Lindsay, help me with the dessert plates." The kitchen door swung shut behind them, shutting me out, even from the pretense of family bonding. I found myself drifting away from the main room, claiming a headache and searching for solitude. The hall was dim, silent, but for the faint jingling of a Christmas playlist. I found Ethan, my younger brother, sprawled on the couch, barely looking up from his phone. I asked if I could check an email, and he handed the phone over absent-mindedly, never glancing at my face. That small act felt almost like trust, but in the quiet, glowing light of his screen, I watched my own world collapse. The notification that irrevocably changed everything. A post from my father's public feed, pushed to friends, business partners, and the entire Charleston community. If you could erase one person from your family, would you? Brittany's cost us enough. She can't get her life together, and it's dragging us down. A chill spidered up my spine as I scrolled. Beneath Dad's post, there were comments. So many comments. Mom, who had never posted anything remotely confrontational in her life, wrote, "Some people just don't learn, I guess." Lindsay, who had always been the star, added, "Charleston's a small place. Maybe it's time for Brittany to try her luck somewhere else." The floodgates opened after that. Neighbors, old family friends, even the Sunday school teacher who had sent me cards as a child chimed in. Maybe some people just invite misfortune. Even Ethan's name was there, a quiet like. But that was enough. I was gutted. It wasn't just their words. It was their apathy, their willingness to let the world see me as a pariah. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the glow of the phone. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a family squabble. It was public, deliberate. My knees felt weak, nausea surged. I could still hear distant bursts of laughter and the clink of glasses coming from the dining room. But in that dim hallway, with a stranger's phone in my hands and my entire reputation shredded to pieces, I realized I'd never felt more alone. I stumbled out onto the porch, the frosty air hitting me all at once, sharp, a merciful slap back to reality. I pressed my back to the railing, fighting the urge to scream. Tears burned hot in my eyes, but pride held them in check. What had I done to deserve this? Was my only crime refusing to fit the Turner mold? Never enough, always falling short of their imagined ideal. It was in that moment, staring out at the dark Charleston night, that a quiet, hard determination toughened inside me. I rifled through the post again, screenshotting every word, every name. Their betrayal wasn't just personal. It was public, viral, poisonous enough to seep far beyond the four walls of a home built on appearances. The night that should have been about hope and forgiveness had become the night my life and my relationship to my family broke for good. The pain was sharp, but beneath it all, anger flickered to life. The betrayal cut deeper than words. The knowledge that even your own blood would trade your dignity for a joke, a little attention, or a scrap of approval from neighbors and friends. No more, I promised myself. No more letting their voices drown out my own. That Christmas night, everything changed. And as I let the tears finally fall, I realized something else too. I wasn't going to let them define me anymore, no matter the cost. The choice to fight back and demand justice. The morning after that wretched Christmas, the world outside was cold and gray. Charleston's skyline blurred in a drizzle. But inside my one-bedroom apartment, something in me had sparked to life. The night before, humiliation and anger had tangled my thoughts. But after hours pacing the kitchen, replaying every detail from the post to the last withering glance in the hallway, the fog began to clear. I knew I couldn't let them get away with this. I was done being the Turner family's quiet scapegoat. I started by gathering every scrap of evidence. I picked up my phone and called Holly Campbell. Holly and I had known each other since our freshman year at the College of Charleston. She was the practical friend who always seemed to know exactly what to do. No sooner had I explained than her tone shifted. Britt, this isn't just a family spat. It's public defamation. You need a good attorney. I'll text you the number for Michael Green. He's helped half the HR department during layoffs.
There it is.
With trembling fingers, I created a folder named Turner Nightmare on my desktop. Screenshots, all the posts, every single ugly, judgmental comment, time-stamped and archived. I scrolled back, checking for edits or deletions, careful not to miss a single detail. There were emails, too. One from a client who had abruptly canceled a $6,000 analytics project after the post went viral, citing concerns about brand image. Another was a terse notification from a professional association putting my membership under review. Each piece of correspondence was evidence not just of hurt feelings, but of measurable harm. But before involving a lawyer, I was determined to give my family a chance to make it right. I drafted a message in the Turner family group chat, my hands only slightly shaking. I saw the post. You've hurt me, and you've damaged my reputation. Take down the post and make a public apology immediately, or I'll be forced to take further steps.
Got it.
I sent it and waited, staring at my phone as the dots danced, then paused. Dad's reply came first. It was just a joke, Britt. Don't be so dramatic. Lindsay followed. The internet isn't real life. Chill out. Mom, as always, was silent. Her non-reply somehow more infuriating than the rest. Ethan's name popped up next in a private message. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Then radio silence. I realized they weren't sorry. They weren't going to fix this. I was on my own. Holly's lawyer friend, Michael Green, called that afternoon from a 912 number. His voice was clipped, but warm, clearly used to bad news. I need details, Brittany. Send over every screenshot, every email, any documentation of lost business, conversations, and posts. Nothing is too small. I spent the rest of the evening compiling my story, laying it out meticulously, timestamp by timestamp, so Michael could see the impact unfold in real time. When he called back, his verdict was decisive. They just gave you an ironclad case. This is not only grounds for a defamation suit, but also for damages. Are you ready for this? Was I? Maybe not. But what other choice did I have? Remaining silent would mean letting their narrative win, allowing them to erase me, not just from the family, but from the professional world I'd worked so hard to build. I gave Michael the go-ahead. That weekend, we sent a formal cease and desist to my father. It was sharply worded, demanding the removal of all defamatory content in a public apology, warning that failure to comply would result in immediate legal action, seeking compensatory and punitive damages. I forwarded it directly to Dad, copying Mom, Lindsay, and Ethan for good measure. Their responses stung, each in a different way. Dad called it an overreaction, saying I was airing family business in public like a traitor. Lindsay doubled down.
I'm so sorry.
Now, you're really making yourself look bad. Mom texted privately for the first time. Are you sure you want to make things worse for everyone? The implication was clear. I was the problem for wanting respect. Ethan, at least, offered, whatever you need, I'll back you up if it goes to court. That tiny lifeline made all the difference. As the news spread through the grapevine in Charleston, ripple effects were swift. Some old neighbors texted their support. Others grew distant. Dad's hardware store saw a drop in regulars. Even Lindsay's magazine pulled her weekly column, pending review. It was surreal to watch the family's public armor begin to crack, all because I dared to fight back. My world was now entwined with legal documents and notepads. Every morning, I'd rise before dawn, coffee in hand, combing through emails, highlighting timelines, updating Michael. There were moments I doubted myself. What if I lost? What if all I did was prove their worst suspicions? But then, I'd remember the comment from a would-be client. Sorry, after seeing the post, we're going another direction. This was about much more than pride. It was about my right to define my own story. By the time court dates were set, I felt battle ready. I'd armed myself with every fact, every instance where their words had cost me opportunities, trust, or peace of mind. Whatever happened in that courthouse, I knew I had done what was right for me. They could try to erase me, but I would not disappear quietly. Facing my family in court, it felt surreal to stand outside the courthouse that morning. Icy December air gnawing at my bare hands, the looming building casting a shadow over the empty street. I had run through this day 100 times in my head, sometimes waking from restless dreams, other times watching the growing pile of legal documents on my kitchen table as Michael, my attorney, plotted strategies on late-night calls. But nothing could have prepared me for the reality. My family seated at the opposing table, the silent weight of our fractured bond filling the silent corridors of justice. I remember tightening my sweater as I stepped through the double doors, flanked by Holly for moral support, and clutching a battered folder labeled Turner Nightmare in clumsy marker. Inside were months of screenshots, canceled contracts, emails recounting the ripple effect of my family's viral betrayal. My knees nearly buckled when I spotted my father at the bench, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his expression unyielding, the same iron mask I'd grown up with. My mother sat beside him, jaw set as if she were holding in tears or recriminations. Lindsay scrolled through her phone, pointedly not meeting my gaze. Ethan, to my relief, sat behind me on the plaintiff's side, his presence an anchor. The courtroom itself was colder than I expected. Its cypress benches and historic molding, a faint reminder of Charleston's genteel facade. The presiding judge was a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed and unsentimental. When the bailiff announced, "Turner versus Turner, defamation and damages," I felt every heartbeat in my chest. It was a headline no local paper would dare run, but I could sense the electricity in the room. Family business dragged brutally into the light. Michael laid the case out with the precision I'd come to expect. The facts of the post, the public nature of the humiliation, the measurable financial and reputational cost. He submitted into evidence the offending post, its thread of comments, and careful documentation of lost professional opportunities, contracts withdrawn, speaking engagements canceled, membership reviews pending. My hands trembled as he read out the company names. Each was a small dream lost, a door slammed shut. My father took the stand first. He tried to keep his voice easy, telling the court the post was a misguided attempt at tough love, not intended for public consumption. He insisted he had no idea the post would spread so widely, chalking it up to social media getting out of hand, and tried to downplay the cruel wording as just venting. Michael, stone-faced, pressed him on whether he realized his follower list contained hundreds of local business owners and decision-makers. My father hesitated, then claimed again that his intentions had been harmless. From behind him, Mom's knuckles were white around a tissue. Lindsay, of course, delivered a performance crafted for maximum sympathy. She spoke of family conflicts blowing out of proportion and online life not reflecting reality. She apologized in court, but her words rang hollow as she avoided detailing her own involvement in the comments. My mother briefly took the stand, mostly nodding in support of Dad's testimony, saying she wished things had never gone public. Her voice was so soft that the judge had to ask her to speak up. When my turn came, I wasn't ready for how exposed I'd feel, staring out at the courtroom, recounting each wave of betrayal and the concrete impact on my life. I read aloud from lost client emails, trying to keep my composure as I described the insomnia, the spiraling anxiety, the days spent fielding questions from business contacts who now eyed me with suspicion. Holly squeezed my hand beneath the table. I forced myself not to look at my parents as I described the humiliation of having my own family turn their backs in such spectacular, viral fashion. Under questioning, I described the process, how I reached out privately, how my family had refused to take the post down or offer a substantive apology, how their stubbornness forced me into legal recourse. Michael guided me in walking the judge through every loss in the increasingly public fallout. The more I spoke, the more real my pain became, not just to the court, but to myself. Ethan, when called, was honest and direct. He admitted to liking the post in a moment of discomfort, apologizing for not intervening sooner. His testimony about the impact on my mental health and the atmosphere within the family before and after added a prism of truth the judge could not ignore. Ethan described how tense the house had become, how Mom and Dad would strategize behind closed doors, how Lindsay would brush off any hint of contrition with, "It was just a joke, Britt. You'll be fine." Cross-examinations were contentious. My father's lawyer pressed on family loyalty, accusing me of trying to tear down the Turner name for a quick payout. I held my ground, explaining again and again that this lawsuit was never about money, but about restoring my name and my future. The judge asked pointed questions of my parents, focusing on their social standing and their knowledge of how small and gossip-driven the Charleston business world was. When pressed about the lasting effects of reputation loss in such an environment, my father stumbled, finally mumbling, "Maybe I underestimated how far it'd go." Throughout the day, the atmosphere thickened, resentments surfacing, nerves fraying under the harsh neon light of legal scrutiny. My parents' facade began to crack for the first time in years. Lindsay's bravado shrank with every documented example, every witness called. I watched as my family retreated further into their defensive shell, whispering among themselves during breaks, casting angry glances across the aisle. My mother would not return my gaze, her face now drawn and tired, while my father's confidence faltered for brief, unguarded seconds. When closing arguments arrived, Michael was firm, articulating the personal and professional damage, the deliberate nature of the defamation, and the family's ongoing refusal to accept or remedy the harm. My father's attorney, by contrast, appealed desperately to the sanctity of family and the culture of forgiveness. But the judge cut him short, reminding the courtroom that intentions do not always excuse consequences, particularly when careless words fuel a public digital pile-on. The verdict wasn't immediate. It would take another agonizing week. But as we filed out of the courtroom, I felt a lightness I hadn't recognized in months. I had taken the hardest step, standing up not just to strangers, but to those whose love I once thought unconditional. That day in court marked the moment I reclaimed my own story, no longer allowing my family to script it for me. Regardless of the outcome, I had forced those who tried to erase me to see, if only for a day, the cost of their cruelty and the power I had found by refusing to remain silent. Reborn on new soil, the end of a journey to reclaim myself. 6 months after that infamous day in Charleston's courthouse, my life bore almost no resemblance to the fragile, lonely existence that once clung to old family patterns. Now, sunlight pours through the floor-to-ceiling windows of a small apartment in Atlanta, a gift I gave myself, paid for with late-night consulting contracts and the hard-won peace that comes from letting go. Every detail in this new place speaks of deliberate choice. There are no family portraits on the wall. Instead, there are vibrant prints by local artists, a kitchen cluttered with mismatched mugs from road trips with friends, and a stack of novels I'd meant to read for years. During those first weeks on my own, the silence was unfamiliar, daunting, and at times, deafening. I mourned the version of family I'd always wanted, but never truly had. But little by little, a sweet quietness seeped in. I crafted new rituals, a morning walk past Piedmont Park, evening yoga on my tiny balcony, taco nights with my next-door neighbor, Megan, who never asked why I'd left Charleston. Atlanta's rhythm was different, less about reputation or pedigree, more about showing up, listening, and starting over. Professionally, the fallout was as real as I'd feared, but so was the new growth. Some old clients, either scandalized by the Turner name's now-tarnished legacy or uncomfortable with my decision to go public, quietly faded away. I sent polite termination emails, wished them well, and let them drift. In their place came unexpected new opportunities. Small businesses and nonprofits drawn to my story, fellow survivors of public shaming, and a surprising number of women in tech who wanted data strategies without the gloss or the gossip. My story, shared at a local networking event, didn't drive potential partners away. It drew them closer. The first time I told my experience, aloud, I trembled so hard, I thought I might drop the microphone. I didn't sugarcoat the memories, the callous jokes, digital betrayal, or the heartbreaking choice to take my family to court. In the crowd, I saw nods, quiet murmurs of recognition, even tears. Afterward, 3 women lingered to thank me. They'd seen their own pain in my story. And one, a startup founder, contracted my consulting services on the spot. That moment marked the real beginning. The shift from victim to architect, from inherited shame to self-claimed dignity. Relationships, once tainted by suspicion and questions, soon flourished in unexpected places. Megan became my confidant, quick with a sarcastic joke or a freshly baked loaf of bread when work left me numb. Our building's maintenance man, Terrence, stopped by with potted succulents for my windowsill and stories about his mother's tenacity. These odd, mismatched connections, free from the silent ledger of family judgment, became a tapestry of new belonging. Even my old friend Holly, the one who urged me to seek legal help, made frequent road trips south, reminding me that the best families are chosen. As for my biological family, the Turner legend faded into the background. My father faced community backlash. The once bustling hardware store lost its regulars, and Dad was forced into uneasy retirement. My mother, always preoccupied with saving face, withdrew from social gatherings and neighborhood committees. Lindsay, the golden child, found her once gushing social media presence reduced to civil but distant posts. A magazine editor from Charleston called me privately to apologize for taking her side so quickly. Ethan, my steadfast brother, visited a few times, awkward but earnest, always reminding me, "You did what was right, sis." Forgiveness was, and remains, a thorny, complicated thing. I didn't forgive to let my family off the hook. I did it to breathe easier, to cut the last threads of their hold on my self-worth. There were letters, sent, but left unanswered. Holiday invites came and went, unopened on my kitchen counter. Sometimes late at night, the urge to call my mother would surface, but I'd let it pass. I'd learned, finally, that missing what could have been is not the same as needing to go back for more pain. My biggest lesson, etched deep as any scar. Blood is not a lifetime ticket to loyalty, nor is it a guarantee of kindness. We owe our families honesty and care, never blind allegiance, especially at the cost of ourselves. I emerged from the Turner saga with the knowledge that I don't owe anyone the right to diminish me, especially not those linked by DNA. In reclaiming my story, I found my power, not in one cathartic courtroom verdict, but in 1,000 small moments after. Each mundane, joyful day proved I could create meaning beyond the shadows of old wounds. Data analytics might once have been my refuge from pain, but now they are simply the work I love, entwined with the sought life I chose. I filled the empty corners of my new home with laughter that rings true, fireside chats with friends who know the worst of my past and choose me for my present. If there's anything I'd offer to others standing at the edge of their own family's betrayal, it's this: you are not what they say you are. You are not defined by your worst day, nor are you the footnote in someone else's headline. Walk away when you must. Stand your ground, even when it trembles beneath you. One day, months or years from now, you will look up and see that you are not alone. You belong to yourself, and that is enough.